Harvey Brough is a tenor, instrumentalist, arranger, and composer of numerous choral works for instruments and voices. He joins us now from London, UK. Greetings to you, Harvey. Thanks for joining me in the spotlight today.
Hello there. It's great to see you again. Great to be in the spotlight.
I hope you have your own over there. I know you're joining me virtually, but it's great. So.
I always take a spotlight wherever I go.
And you're active now as a choir director and composer, so I just thought I'd ask you first how things are going.
Things are good, kind of hectic. I mentioned to you when we actually met in London at Christmas time, which was very nice, but so we were able to talk a bit more in depth then, but I was just starting a new choir. So now I have 3 choirs and possibly a 4th on the cards. I do it in London. I do 2 rehearsals on a Tuesday with my choir, Vox Holloway, which is based very near me in London. And then on Wednesday, I'm in Southampton. I'm a professor of music at Southampton University. Not a sentence I ever expected to say, I have to say, but they gave me a professorship, and that's been an amazing thing for me. And so I run a choir there. And then on a Thursday, I travel 2 hours to Leamington Spa, which is up near Birmingham, and do a choir there. So the middle of my week is packed full of singing, and it's an absolute joy, partly because all the choirs are so different, actually. I don't know how that happens, but they are very different, and they respond in different ways, and they have different strengths. It's been very interesting to have 3. I've done 2 for a long time, but now you see the differences. I feel very, very lucky to have this vocation, really, and you understand that very well.
And are they singing different kinds of repertoire? Are they singing your music or a mix? What's their repertoire like?
Well, I got to confess, it's mostly my own music. Although we do sing other things. We've all sung the Fauré Requiem and some of the great classic works. But to be honest, when I started writing stuff for choir, music for choir, this choir in London, Vox Holloway, had just started, and it was a beautiful idea. It was just anyone who wants to come and sing, whether you've sung it before, whether you read music or anything, everybody come, sing. And it was a lovely idea. And the first concert, which I was not very involved in, but they did a Messiah. And really, it was just, it's just so hard. And I can't say it was sort of brilliant. And in fact, the friend of mine was running it at that time and rang me and said, "Oh, the orchestra's just dropped out the day before the concert." So it was all a bit kind of chaotic, but it had a great sort of spirit to it. And I was away on tour, actually, so I said, "Look, I'm sorry, I can't quite help with this." And I thought, I don't know. But then he was away the next term, and I said, "Would you do the next project?" And I thought, I didn't feel very sure about it, but I thought, well, I don't know. People want to sing. Let's see. Try and make something happen. And actually that opened a whole door for me as a composer, because I just thought we can't do the Mozart Requiem, we can't do the Fauré, we can't do the normal repertoire. It just would be, it'd be ruining it and murdering it. And so it actually presented to me an opportunity as a composer to write or arrange things that just worked for them where they were. And then as we went on, I kind of notched it up a little bit, made it a little bit harder. And so that then creates a challenge, which people do enjoy if you can judge it right. And then gradually over the years, because I've done Vox Holloway for 15 years now, and they know really, really fine. And they do a lot of very unusual stuff for choirs, which is quite rhythmic, because I have a background in jazz and various different types of music, but I love doing rhythmic stuff, and that's not so usual, as you know from doing freedom song. But it's unusual, but perfectly possible if you teach them well. And they've just got so very good now, and I've now written about 20 kind of really big pieces. And the other side of that for me as composer was just being able to, rather than perform these wonderful masterworks from years gone by, which talk, about, say, Elijah or something. It's about ancient history, which is, is still very relevant to us today. But it gave me the chance to write pieces about things that I truly, truly about the world we live in. And so I've ended up bizarrely writing about climate change, or even slavery, or lots of different issues. We've done a piece about Palestine. We've done lots of different things, and that's quite the one about mental health, which I'm very proud of. And for choirs to sing about those things is sometimes a challenge, but a great opportunity as well. And that's been a great thing for me as a composer, just that. And actually, the other thing is every term I have to come up with something new. So everyone else is enjoying the kind of thing, oh, we're doing the concert now. And I'm thinking, oh, my God, what's next? Trying to write or arrange or something. So far, I've managed it.
But something new times 4.
Yeah, well, it has to. I mean, as any composer will tell you, when the pandemic happened, I was trying to write the piece which I've mentioned to you, "The Sun Does Shine," and there was no deadline, and I just couldn't do it. I have to have a deadline. So, yeah, as we all do,
Well, you mentioned Freedom Song in passing. Tell us a little bit about that one.
Well, that's a very unusual subject, shall we say, for I'm a choir boy from Coventry Cathedral in England, the UK, and it's a piece about slavery. So that's a kind of weird thing, but the way it came about was this. It's called Freedom Song. It was in the 150th anniversary of the emancipation of slavery came around, and me and this friend who started Vox together, Justin Butcher, we wanted to do something to try and commemorate that, but we thought about it and kind of thought, you can't just sing spirituals, without some kind of context to them. You can't just they are folk music and they are available to everybody and they should be sung by everybody, but they've come out of such cruel circumstances that you can't just say put on your bow ties and do a nice concert of spirits. Is not possible. And we were looking around and I heard this curious tale, which I actually thought was kind of made up or just, couldn't really be true, about a choir of slaves from Fisk University. And maybe it's better known in America, but I don't think it's very, very well known there. But anyway, in this country, it's not known at all. And it's the Fisk Jubilee Singers. And so I'd heard vaguely about them, and I went to see this friend of mine who's a real gospel expert. Well, actually, I met him through that. He's now a friend. And he said, yes, the Fisk Jubilee. He says, you need this book, and just reached over and fetched a book, and there's a red-bound, old-fashioned-looking book, and it just said the history of the story of the Fisk Jubilee Singers. And I looked at it, and I thought, oh, my God, it's incredible. And so I flicked through it, and there's pages and pages telling what happened. And at the end, there were like 200 spirituals just laid out like hymns, and it just like dropped into my hands. And I thought, this could be it, because what they did, they came off the fields. They were trying. The Fisk University was the first place to educate slaves, people who'd been enslaved, and they formed a choir to try and raise money to build the university. And again, it's not, I'm not from that culture, of course, but it just so fascinated me. I kind of thought, well, maybe by doing that, we can sing the things. And they were the very first, so anyway, they toured around America. And in the South, they had terrible persecution and just, awful racism and struggled a lot. And then they started going a bit further north, and it got, it's a bit better, but not great. But they did get to New York, and they began to become quite successful. And then Mark Twain wrote to the Earl of Shaftesbury in this country and said, you have to hear these people. And they set off on a boat and came to England. And they did, and Scotland and Wales and Ireland, they did 200 at least gigs over here over several years. They did various tours. And they met Queen Victoria, and they met Gladstone, the Prime Minister. And in this country, I think they were still treated, not quite sort of as, no, I think maybe more as equals. I don't know. It's very hard to know the exact thing, but they were treated with respect, I think, and slightly as a kind of slightly curious kind of novelty type thing. But nonetheless, they met, some amazing people, and they sang everywhere, from cathedrals to soup kitchens to schools. They toured around the whole country. They spent 3 weeks in Scarborough having a holiday, which is, for those who don't know, it's probably most people, it's a kind of curious town up north, not where you would think people would take holidays, but English people would brave the waves and they're kind of shivering and kind of what the Fifth Jubilee Singers made. I cannot imagine, but they did so many concerts here, and then they went on to Europe and to America, to Australia and Japan even. So it's like the most incredible story. And I thought, well, that's not really your story to tell. But then I just thought, it's, if we can't celebrate those people, to put it in context, I mean, it's a black story, obviously. So we have 4 black soloists who sing the songs and tell the story, and a narrator who plays the part of Mr. White. And Mr. White was their choir master, and he was white. And that is such an interesting relationship. They had very, very close, amazing relationship. And so those people narrate the story, and our choir is predominantly white, although we work with other choirs which are more diverse. We work with the Hackney Empire Choir, which Hackney that's really the home of black culture in London. And so although the choir is predominantly white, we sort of are there as witnesses, as these sort of slavery and their journey is kind of, that is narrated and told. And then gradually the choir becomes more and more involved. And then we start, and it just makes a very powerful end result, as I hope you know, because you've done it twice, which is a great joy to me, because I thought it was really something that would only be of interest to people in this country. But actually, I think that was the reason why you actually found it interesting yourselves, because it's a bit of it's something different to what you might know there.
That's right, and the Fisk Jubilee Singers are well known in the Northeast. Here, in fact, George Leonard White is an historical figure from New York. He grew up in Cattaraugus County, very near where we are here in Rochester, so it feels very much like a New York story as well as a Northeast and a U.S. and a human story. So,
yeah. Very much.
And that's not your only large major scale work for chorus and instruments. Tell us about some of the others. I think you have an oratorio named Thekla.
Yeah, Thekla is an amazing story. I mean, again, it's another thing. It was a commission. Someone asked me, a town near Oxford called Wantage wanted a thing to commemorate the 200th anniversary of the town being formed, I think it was, and they came up with that story. And it's a biblical story about this woman Thekla. But it's not actually an official. It's in the Apocrypha, which is I'm not an expert, but it's a bit of the Bible. It's sort of like a side project to the Bible. I can't explain it very well, but it wasn't like the official Bible, possibly because it's the story of a woman. But she's an amazing kind of a character. I mean, she came from humble background, and she heard Paul, who became later St. Paul, but she heard him preaching through an open window. She didn't see him. Through this open window, they heard the words of Paul and thought that, and was struck with this vision that she had to follow that. So she then went on the road with him, sort of preaching and, testifying, and they went around, and because she was a woman, there was various bits of persecution. People were outraged that she was, following this guy Paul. I mean, there was nothing romantic about it. It was, but it was all about faith. But she was persecuted for her faith, and had a remarkable series of escapes in a very biblical style. At one point, they tried to burn her at the stake, which you can imagine not pretty at all. But a rain cloud comes and drops rain and puts the fire out, and she is miraculously saved. It's a really powerful thing. And then another one, she's thrown to the lions and is in the lion's cage, and the women and children of the town throw herbs and spices, and the lions keel over with this. So it's kind of very sort of simple. It's a bit like a child's view of the Bible, but it's very, very moving. And again, I mean, it's a female story, but it just moved me so much. I thought, well, and it's performed obviously by an amazing female singer, and it's a very powerful female story. But I felt able to kind of tell that story largely because it wasn't known actually, and I just thought, well, it's fallen to me. I do it with my as much humbleness and love as I can, and that if it works, I know it works for people. So that was a lucky story to come across. and done another couple of things. And this one I mentioned about mental illness, or the people going through that. 2 or 3. I'm going to mention Justin Butcher again, who did the libretto for some of these things. But he and I both lost friends over the course of a year. About 4 friends to suicide. People. A particular friend of mine was a viola player, just the loveliest guy, seemed to be absolutely fine. I had no idea that he had to turn. He played for me many times, beautiful person, and suddenly this guy Vince just went. He committed suicide and was gone. I was sort of really just bewildered by it because it just seemed so unlike him. And 2 or 3 others, that we knew of, people who had gone, and we were thinking, what. We feel so powerless in life. Often these terrible things happen, and I suppose one of the gifts I've been given is to sort of to try through music to. In fact, the first piece that I wrote is a piece called Requiem Blue, and that was about the death of my brother, which many years later. But I was 17, he was 19. He was in a motorbike accident, so the worst possible thing that could happen to me and my family, a dreadful thing. However, from it came this sort of almost compulsion to remember him and to, in the end, to write this requiem about him. And it has all stuff from our childhood together about singing as boys, and even about when he died, a bell tolling when I was waiting for him to arrive in a college in Cambridge, and he didn't arrive because he'd been killed on the way on his motorbike, and I had arrived with his things, and he didn't arrive. So there were all these details in the piece, but it gave me a need to say that. And I think for a composer that, it's all very well to think I would like to be a composer, but you have to have something to say as well. So I did that piece for him, and then this mental health piece, I just thought, well, okay, how can we do that? And Justin came up with a very brilliant libretto, and the first half is poems by people who were considered to be mad in their time, like John Clare, the most exquisite poem, 3 stanzas called I Am, and it's just beautiful. I was actually very intimidated about writing it because it was so beautiful. I thought, don't mess that up. It would just be awful. And I didn't write it for a long time, and finally it just sort of came to me. But so then Kubla Khan by Coleridge Taylor, which so Samuel Coleridge, sorry, and Emily Dickinson. Much Madness is I can remember the tune. A poem about madness, and Sylvia Plath and various different poets. So that was the first half. People considered to be mad, who were writing these incredible poems. And then the second half is very interesting. It's by a woman called Kay Redfield Jamieson, and it's a very influential book, known to some people. I didn't know it at all, but it's a book about her journey through. She was studying psychology or something related to mental illness, and discovered she had basically manic depression, which is her preferred term for, they call it bipolar. They're interchangeable, really, but manic depression she preferred because it does describe the highs and the lows. And it's a book called The Unquiet Mind. And it's an account of her illness. And she was studying it and wouldn't take her lithium. She was being prescribed lithium and didn't take it. And so the story is this kind of bizarre kind of roller coaster through highs and lows. Something that's incredibly funny, and then there's a real crash, and the thing that struck me about that was just that it was very familiar to me. We all have highs and lows, but they're perhaps regulated with people struggling with that. The highs are very, very high, like ecstatic, and the lows are, and so she tells that story, and we sing her story, and sometimes the choir is her, sometimes the different people, and it's very, very moving. We did it also with a choir from mental health hospital, and big one in London called Maudsley Hospital. So people actually suffering from or dealing with that problem, but also helpers and carers and family, were able to come together and sing about, and that's a very fine, again, same with the slavery thing, just a fine line to walk along, because if it was in any way kind of tokenistic or it has to be really true. And I was so happy that the people who did come to sing from the hospital were, absolutely adamant that it was helping them and really a powerful thing to do. And we told that story, and I think everybody in the choir felt, this is it's not just about them; it's about us. We all have a degree of mental good health and a degree of mental not so good health, and it was so. Yeah, these are the things that I'm quite a sort of modest chap, really, and I feel a need to take on these big themes somehow and sing about stuff that really deeply affects me, and I feel lucky to have done that.
Well, singing has been a vehicle of effecting social change for those who lack the traditional leverages of power, such as station or political position or money or connections or industrial power. And talk a little about the effect that these pieces have in the greater community. Do you engage the community in your performances, do outreach and that sort of thing?
Well, that's a great question, because I think really for anything like that, you really need to. You don't just sort of sit in your ivory tower and say, I have written this great piece and come and we there's another with the Freedom song. We did outreach with schools. We had schools singing with us as well, and that was interesting because the schools in the UK and I'm sure everywhere now are so much more diverse. So that brought in a lot of Asian kids and black kids and to sing in this piece. They had to be a little bit older because it does describe slavery. So there was 17, 18-year-olds to sing in the Hackney Empire, which is a fabulous venue. It was very exciting. But then we took it further with this another piece I should mention, which is called "The Sun Does Shine," and that's a bizarre thing. Again, I felt very kind of dubious about whether I should do it. But I read a review of a book called "The Sun Does Shine" by Anthony Ray Hinton. And all it was an account of the book saying that he is 30 years on death row. And when he came out, he was completely innocent, completely framed, no question about it. But when he was finally came out, he had no bitterness, or he had some anger perhaps, but he came out with his humanity, his humor, his spirituality, all intact, and is now a campaigner against the death sentence, and is an incredibly sort of and his time in prison was so difficult. He didn't speak to anyone for 3 years because he was clearly framed, completely innocent, and he threw his Bible under the bed, wouldn't speak to anyone. And then as he came on, tried to make the best of this horrendous situation he was in and started to make friends and became a bit of a sort of pastor with the other prisoners, and sort of gave them advice, and, just a very wise soul. But it took him 15 years to find a lawyer, and this amazing guy, Brian Stevenson, who's now quite famous for doing many of these cases, he finally got through to him, but then it took another 15 years for the so-called wheels of justice to turn and to be released. And he finally was released. So I saw this review, and I ordered the book and I read it, and I thought, could you possibly make a piece out of this? It's crazy because it's one man in a cell for 30 years. But he had his mother, was a big character in his life, obviously, and so in the piece as well. And he had a friend called Lester, and that happened to be the name of my brother who died. And it just, I know, this sort of, in a way, it's insignificant, but it seemed for me, it was significant. And his brother, his friend Lester visited him every single week for 30 years, doing a 700-mile round trip or something, sort of incredible devotion, and was there when he came out of the prison. And again, I thought, it's a black story. Why would I do it? But we're just so moved by it. We wrote to Anthony Ray Hinton and said, can we do this? And I didn't think of this at the time, but looking back, he didn't. I don't know. He just said yes. I don't think he said, he didn't ask any questions. Say, are you black? Are you, we just said, we're from London and we want to try and write a piece about your story. Will you give us permission? He just said yes. And that actually for me gave me a sense of duty. If he would let us tell his story, it's me again with Justin, then the fact that we're white it's important, but it's not the most important thing. I just felt that we had to do it, and again we did it with this amazing, it's very much a collaborative thing, because the singers I wrote it for, don't think I could have done it without him. He's just an amazing guy called Wills Morgan, opera singer, but just the most incredible performer. And he had to be because he was on stage for 2 hours solid, because he's in every single scene. And then the predominantly white choir behind are witnesses, and sometimes they're the jury kind of, condemning him to death, and sometimes they're him, sometimes they're support to him. It becomes a very interesting dynamic. And again, we did that at the Hackney Empire, which is the home of black culture here. And it, by the end of the piece, it was amazing. People were really following it. And when he was finally released, there was people shouting "Hallelujah!" Actually, we did it just for Easter, and it is a story of redemption. And there's a kind of, he rises at the end. So anyway, I have to finally answer your question. The outreach work we did with that one, I had to explain the story just to give some. So we wanted to relate it to our country, which doesn't have the death sentence, but there are still hundreds of, maybe thousands of people in prison who are innocent, certainly many. And so we did a letter writing program to prisoners and came up with the most extraordinary stuff, including one guy who's now released but still trying to prove his innocence, who's a musician, and we went and sang in his prison. An incredibly cultured guy, brilliant. He's done we coached him to do a kind of quite advanced singing diploma thing. And this guy, Wills Morgan, went into the prison. I went and played, and we worked with him in the prison to do this diploma for the Royal Academy of Music. And it turned into, a huge thing. And just through this letter writing program, then we made a film about it. It turned into an enormous, and that's not credit to me, actually. It's credit to the people that I work with. I have this amazing committee, and particularly this amazing person, Tricia Zipfel, who believed in it so passionately that, she made all this. She applied for, we had got 3 Arts Council grants for it, which in the current climate is, can imagine that, getting money, funding. We do most things without any funding, but, or through tickets. So she got 3 Arts Council grants and made the whole thing happen. So it turned into this massive thing.
That's marvelous. Well, we can discuss these all day, but I wanted to let people know that they can find this music.
Sorry.
It's recorded. This is a recording of Thekla, and this is your recording of Requiem in Blue, where you're a conductor on these items as well. You mentioned The Sun Does Shine. And here's a lovely piece, lovely collection called The Bells of Paradise. And that's all Christmas music. This one is a virtual Vox recording called Everything Must Change. So, tell us, do you have a website where people can buy these, really briefly?
I'm very bad at that stuff. I mean, it's all available on Apple Music and through regular suppliers, but my website is hopelessly out of date. I'm so busy trying to make my singers happy. I'm very bad at promoting, so thank you for the opportunity to come and talk about it a little bit. I hope it's of interest to your audience.
So the music is by Harvey Brough. He's a tenor, instrumentalist, arranger, and composer of works for instruments and voices, all very interesting and having to do with modern and social justice issues. He's a wonderful guest. We could talk to him all day. Thank you so much, Harvey, for joining us from London, UK today. It's great to
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you. Join us next time in the Spotlight. Thank you for being with us.